Hey everyone, welcome to this explainer. Today, we're literally peeling back the layers of election polling to figure out what's really driving those numbers you see everywhere. We're going to take a hard, honest look at the mechanics, the money, and the hidden agendas behind the percentages plastered all over your screens during election season. You might walk into that voting booth thinking you're making a totally independent choice, but as we dive into this data today, you're going to see how carefully crafted narratives are actually designed to influence us.
Okay, before we even get into the agenda, you've got to hear this staggering admission from India's former Chief Election Commissioner, S.Y. Qureshi. When someone at the very top of the election monitoring ecosystem goes on record to say that polling agencies are openly selling fabricated data to the highest bidder, well, let that sink in. We are no longer just talking about statistics here. We're talking about a massive industry built on manipulation. So here is how we're going to break this down today. 1. The rise of election polls. 2. Opinion versus exit polls. 3. The business of manipulation. 4. The Election Commission's rules. And 5. The stock market trap. We'll navigate the history, the reality of paid surveys, the legal battles, and that massive financial trap just waiting for retail investors. All right, let's dive straight into Section 1, the rise of election polls, and see how predicting elections went from a college thesis to a booming industry in India. Polling certainly didn't start out as this massive media circus. Way back in 1920, George Gallup actually developed the technique for his PhD thesis, just trying to predict mass opinion using small sample sizes. A massive milestone hit in 1936 when he famously used his method to correctly predict FDR's U.S. presidency win. That basically validated the concept for the whole world. Jump to 1979, and NDTV's Prannoy Roy, along with market researchers, brought these surveys to India, publishing their early findings in India Today magazine. And by 1980, the modern exit poll had officially made its debut in Indian politics. By 1984, these predictions started getting incredibly accurate, and suddenly the media's hunger for this data just exploded. It literally birthed a brand new profession in India, the psephologist. These are the professionals tasked with decoding the mind of the voter. They started out using advanced techniques like cluster sampling, and today they're even using AI dashboards. But as their popularity went through the roof, so did their power to heavily influence voter behavior, kind of turning elections from organic choices into these highly strategic, data-driven battles. Moving right along to Section 2, opinion versus exit polls. We really need to distinguish between the two major types of election surveys dominating the news. Look, the biggest thing to remember here is the timing. Opinion polls measure the pre-election mood, right? They ask voters what issues they care about before any votes are actually cast. Exit polls, on the flip side, happen the exact moment a voter leaves the booth. They capture the post-vote reality by asking who the voter actually supported just seconds ago. And because of that immediate, real-world context, exit polls are considered far more accurate, and because of that, they're way more influential on the public. Okay, Section 3, the business of manipulation. This is where we peel back another layer and look at the dark underbelly of the polling business. So why does the Western way of polling completely fall apart here? Well, Western models are built for neat two-party systems, whereas India is this massive, multi-party chaos. Plus, our language, caste, and cultural dynamics literally change every few kilometers. Add to that, vital demographics like female voters, who are so often the true kingmakers, are drastically underrepresented. They make up only about 20 to 25% of sample data. And finally, there's the fear factor. A lot of voters just flat out lie to surveyors out of fear of retribution from ruling parties. All of this makes predicting an Indian election mathematically, well, almost impossible. But let's say you actually want to do it right. To give you a sense of the scale, just look at this number. Back in 2009, a legitimate polling agency like CSDS spent an immense 1 crore rupees just to properly survey 300 people. I mean, authentic, deeply researched polling requires absolutely massive manpower and funding. And because doing it right costs an absolute fortune, the door to corruption just swings wide open. A 2014 sting operation by News Express reporters proved exactly this. These reporters posed as political officials, approached 11 polling agencies, and basically asked them to rig the numbers. Now, 2 reputable agencies immediately told them to get lost, but the others, not so much. The sting actually caught the managing director of C-Voter, admitting that some tweaking of the data could be arranged, though the agency later claimed the footage was edited. But the reality is clear. If you have the pash, a favorable poll can simply be bought. When you really visualize the logistics of these surveys, it's mind-boggling. India has 543 Lok Sabha seats and roughly 10 lakh polling booths. The absolute biggest survey agencies only manage a sample size of around 2 to 8 lakh people across maybe 5 to 10,000 booths. Trying to predict the outcome for an entire nation based on a tiny budget constraint sample like that is statistically a nightmare. Because it's so expensive and so difficult, some media outlets don't even bother hiring agencies anymore. Nope, they literally sit in their newsrooms and completely fabricate exit poll numbers just to save money and boost their TV ratings. Which brings us to Section 4, the Election Commission's rules. Given this massive potential for manipulation, let's see how the authorities have tried to rein this industry in. This has been a bitter, years-long tug of war. Back in 1996, polls predicted a hung parliament, meaning no party gets a majority, and it severely impacted how people voted. Recognizing the danger, the Election Commission issued guidelines in 1998 to ban these pre-election polls. But look what happens next. In 1999, the media, terrified of losing their massive TV ratings, just completely ignored the guidelines, and the courts actually struck the ban down. It took until 2004 for the law to catch up, amending the Representation of the People Act with Section 126A, finally giving the EC some real teeth. This brings us to what we now call the silence period. To stop voters from being unfairly influenced, the EC established these super strict broadcast windows. Opinion polls are now totally banned 48 hours before an election. And exit polls? They have an even tighter leash. They cannot be broadcast until exactly 30 minutes after the final vote of the absolute last phase of the election has been cast. And make no mistake, breaking this rule is a serious criminal offense. Authorities have literally filed criminal cases that sent an online editor to jail for publishing exit polls too early. But here's the kicker. Laws only work if they can keep up with technology, right? Despite strict rules for TV and print, political parties blatantly bypass the law using a massive social media loophole. Basically, anyone with a smartphone can play psophologist now. Political operatives use fake polling agency names to illegally circulate fabricated seating projections in private WhatsApp groups. They coordinate Twitter trends. They build these massive false winning narratives directly on your phone, completely dodging the EC's carefully designed silence periods. Finally, let's look at Section 5, the stock market trap. We need to talk about why this obscure political manipulation is actually a direct threat to your own wallet. Let's use the 2024 elections as the perfect example of this trap. When highly optimistic, manipulated exit polls get released, investors blindly rush in, assuming policy continuity. I mean, on the back of exit polls alone, shares for companies like Adani skyrocketed by 60%. Reliance hit an all-time high. People were actively sharing stock tips based entirely on these poll projections. But when the actual, totally contradictory election results hit the very next day, the market crashed violently. Panic selling took over, and Adani shares plummeted by 20% almost instantly. The real-world cost of this? It's absolutely devastating. That orchestrated panic resulted in a staggering loss of 2 lakh crore rupees for investors in just one single day. We're talking about average citizens having their savings wiped out. This massive financial shock has sparked serious demands for a CBI inquiry. People want to know, did specific individuals with ties to polling agencies or political parties place bulk trades right before the exit polls dropped? Were they deliberately manipulating the market for their own massive personal profit? Now, you might be thinking, well, I'll just follow the reliable agencies. But look at this track record. Since 2010, today's Chanakya has been correct 4 times. Access My India was heralded as the gold standard with 10 correct predictions. But in 2024, even the historically accurate Access My India failed spectacularly. This proves a vital point. Unless an agency transparently publishes its exact methodology, its sample size, and its raw data, you simply cannot blindly trust their numbers. Even the absolute best in the business are basically making highly educated guesses. So I'm going to leave you with this one crucial question to think about before the next election cycle rolls around. When you look at this screen, are you making financial and democratic decisions based on verified data? Or are you just playing the role of a pawn in a fabricated narrative designed to enrich someone else? The next time an exit poll flashes on your TV, remember the logistics, remember the money, and most importantly, protect your vote and your wallet. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. Keep questioning the numbers, and we'll see you next time.